Hello all, I hope you're doing well today. I was contemplating as I was going to bed last night, I wonder if we're starting to win. And when I say we're, what I mean is, anyone between a conservative, traditionalist, nationalist, even just an Englishman who loves his country and is apolitical. And I say that because recent events have really shown up the true dark heart on elements of the left. I think many of us have said for a while that dark heart has always been there beneath the veneer of lovey-dovey wokeism. It can get quite nasty. And obviously after Charlie Kirk, Irina Zarutska, people have really seen, even the centrist dads have seen what we're talking about there in no uncertain terms, and then celebrating these people's deaths after, especially Charlie Kirk as well. It's not lovey-dovey once you scratch beneath the surface. In fact, it's quite dark. The other thing that I think that's happened is this Unite the Kingdom march. And I know that, as I've said before, not everybody's pro the Unite the Kingdom march. Some people see it as containment, too populist, etc., too ripe for subversion. But it's undeniable that Tommy Robinson got hundreds of thousands on the streets, some say upwards of 1 million. I obviously don't know the actual figures, but it seemed to me that the BBC were lying when they said thousands. It seemed a lot more than thousands on the pictures and images we were getting from the march. Not to mention I saw some leftists basically conceding defeat, saying that we had about 5,000 counter-protesters there. And of course these people are paid for as well. The state surreptitiously subsidises such things and can only muster that, really. So it goes to show there is a strong momentum in the counter direction at the moment. There is, of course, I completely understand there's a wise concern about could that be subverted back into the system, but that's a video for another time. My point with this video is I understand that many people in what you call the Mars circles have differing beliefs on the nature of power. You get the sort of Nietzschean types who think everything's just the will to power. You kind of just need the strong movement or the strong person to almost seize power and lead. And then you have that sort of Thomas Carlyle style great man thing. You just need the great guy to step forth and lead the nation or the people. And then, of course, you have the more traditionalist line on things. It's all about sacred order. And if you're not really aligned to that, it doesn't really matter where you are, even if it looks right on the surface. And then there's the whole elite theory, the academic agent thing. As I understand it, you need a sort of talented nucleus of people who are very politically savvy, know how to work within the system, and they almost seize power, and then they, of course, create almost the orthodoxy from the top down. You could argue that's what we've seen with liberalism as well. Sort of mastered the key institutions and then took over. Personally, I think about it a bit differently than these things. Obviously, I'm closest to the traditionalist perspective. I do believe in sacred order, but I also believe a country, a nation, a people have a sort of consciousness about them, a spiritual consciousness. Now, you can't really pin that down to simple, glib cliches about, we're British and we have a good sense of humour or whatever. These are sort of surface level things. The real soul and spirit of a nation, I think, is deeper. And again, it's transcendent. And I think it can manifest in different ways at different times. And as I've said many times on this channel, I personally believe that at the moment there is a great yearning for that sacred order, that tradition, nation, homeland, community, meaning, structure, the metaphysical dimensions which liberal modernity has so ignored, like I often refer to them as the non-rational parts of life: blood, kin, spirit, God, family, these sorts of things. And people, it's very natural, I believe, for people to source these things. It gives our lives meaning and depth. It gives us coordinates throughout life. The national and spiritual mythologies that a culture follows gives us orientation in our individual lives and makes sure that we're singing from the same hymn sheet. And of course, when you just mix everybody in from every corner of the world, you destroy that. And many of us do believe that destruction was purposeful at this point. Of course, it's an easy way for globalist liberalism to take total power, as well as the market. But anyway, all this aside, I think what we're seeing bubbling up is a response to that. Now, it's not always expressed in the best way, especially in these big populist marches, but I think deep down the instincts are very often aiming in the right direction, or at least pointing to something deeper. And I started to think about how poorly this was going for the liberal mainstream when I read Keir Starmer saying he will never surrender our flag. Or he says we will. Now, who's the we he's talking to? I don't quite know. I would assume he means globalist liberalism. But I won't go through this whole piece because, as you can imagine, it's full of nonsense. But it really is summed up by this tweet here from Starmer. And I had to read this through several times because it just reads abysmally. Abysmally. Now, this might have landed 15 years ago, but even then there would have been people, rolling their eyes and tutting. But now it just reads awfully. As you can see, it's got 4.2 million views and only 14,000 likes. So again, not landing. Anyway, let's go through it. Keir Starmer. People have a right to peaceful protest. It is a core to our country's values. Well, okay, you're not exactly a good representative of that, but whatever. But he does contradict this again, even in this same tweet. Next he states, but we will not stand for assaults on police officers doing their job or for our people feeling intimidated on our streets because of their background or the colour of their skin. Now, he's saying this in reference to the Tommy Robinson March. But as I understand it, and as many people have pointed out at this point, the arrests at Tommy Robinson's march were dwarfed by the arrests at Notting Hill. So immediately you can tell he's lying. Just off the bat propaganda. And again, it doesn't take some more right-leaning traditionalist YouTuber like me to point that out. Anybody can notice this. You don't need to have a critical mind. You don't need to be invested in politics or philosophy. You can just tell he's lying. So straight off the bat, this just isn't landing because what he wants is typical liberalism. They want reality to be a certain way to match their ideology so they feel like the good saviours. But it's just not real. And again, this stuff about colour of their skin, I know many people take the mick out of the Tommy Robinson movement for their sort of embrace of multiculturalism in their own way. But again, there are people from all different backgrounds at Robinson's marches. So again, it's just not landing. He's just not speaking about reality here. But then it really gets bizarre. Britain is a nation proudly built on tolerance, diversity and respect. What? What are you talking about? I mean, this is absolute insanity. What on earth does he mean? Britain, a nation that started, 1,500 years ago in its ethnogenesis. And then we've been through thousands of years, the Battle of Hastings, King Alfred, Magna Carta, the Industrial Revolution, just centuries of history. No, none of that matters. It's just tolerance and diversity and respect, by the way, too. Yeah, because they're good. Well, the only way you can believe this is if you think history started with Tony Blair, which Keir Starmer probably does. That's year zero for them. Everything prior to Blair was just a mistake. Everything after has been correct. But of course, it wasn't built on tolerance, diversity and respect. It was built by the British people. And again, this is where he says it's a core to our country's values. What values are you talking about when he says at the top, if we're built on tolerance, diversity and respect? Basically, what you're saying is, by saying we're built on tolerance, diversity and respect, is we're built on left-wing radical ideology, which we're not. Then he says our flag represents our diverse country and we will never surrender it to those who use it as a symbol of violence, fear and division. Like I said recently, this idea that you're dividing by having an opposing political view, and they will use this word, dividing, like a word spell. Everything divides. Every political ideology is a divide. A flag divides. That's the point of a flag. If you have the British flag and the French flag, it divides between Britain and France. That doesn't mean it's innately hateful. It just means it's its nature. But of course, he's trying to align it with violence and fear. They do this one a lot, fear. As if you're just frightened. There's nothing rational about you. It's just fear. That's the only problem you have with mass immigration and diversity. You're just an irrational, crazy bigot. But like I say, this just isn't landing 14,000 likes out of 4.2 million views because this is just an old script from 20 years ago. And while all of this is going on, Keir Starmer is also having to pretend that he didn't know that Mandelson was in cahoots with Jeffrey Epstein, which we all did somehow. So again, they just have no moral legitimacy anymore for these views. And they try and act as if they're somehow morally superior to you, Whereas in reality, they're increasingly being shown to be morally, or at least amoral, but even immoral at times, especially with his behaviour around Mandelson. And then with that, the absolute gutting out of Britain as a nation. This is not moral what they're doing. As I've been saying for a while, it feels like the moral frame is shifting. I just want to give a couple more examples of that. First up is this woman who's always on the BBC, Zoe Gardner. I've covered her before. Now, she's often given the title of a migration expert. Typical BBC, it turns out she's just a radical left-wing activist. It's just appalling, isn't it? If you didn't laugh, you would cry. But anyway, she's doing her latest bit of agitprop because Donald Trump is visiting, and well, just watch this.
There's a darkness coming. It's already swallowed America, and now it's coming for us too. In 2019, we protested against Donald Trump, and we thought if we shout loud enough, maybe he'll go away. Now he's back. On September 17th, Donald Trump comes back to Britain, and the fight for our future comes to Parliament Square. And how our nation reacts that day decides everything about our future.
Dear Lord. Oh, man. First of all, we just got to start with the turn at the beginning. I love the turn. I mean, look at this. I'll put it in slow motion. I just love that the producer of this said, yeah, we need you looking out over the Thames, so dramatic, and then turning to the camera. I mean, dear Lord, these liberal university student types, I mean, they're all right if you can just keep them in the theatre world, you know, where they can be over dramatic and all of that. But the second they come out of it, they're deluded and dangerous. And what are they even talking about? You shouted at Donald Trump in 2019, the President of the United States, and thought he would just go away. I mean, he doesn't give two shits what you think, and he shouldn't because you're a bunch of student radicals, and he's the President of America. But as I've explored many times on the channel, these leftist types are really just LARPers. You know, they want to make out they're heroic left-wingers with big hearts and strong muscles that are standing up against the evil far right. Of course, they've conceptualised the far right as evil because they get a good old pat on the back from their liberal chums. But deep down they don't realise that it's them that's letting in true chaos into Britain and Europe, as we can see in the next video.
And Birmingham are in flames tonight as masked BDL officers detain hundreds under the Home Security Act. Ministers say it's to protect so-called real Britons, but campaigners say people are vanishing without a trace.
I don't know where they got this from. And Liverpool and Birmingham haven't been in flames over immigration raids. Not to mention we've just seen our Prime Minister believes Britain is all about tolerance and diversity, not about, quote, real Britons. So this is the level of delusion they function under, and well, we've seen with Charlie Kirk how dangerous it can be. But don't worry guys, Zoe's back. She's going to set us all straight, bring some common sense back into things and teach us how to be real human beings, real Britons. Come on, Zoe!
We've got to show them Britain will never bow to fascism. We do not bow to Donald Trump. We've seen the future that they have lined up for us, and we say, fuck that. We are making our own.
Whoa, dropping the F-bombs now. Things are getting really serious. What are you talking about, bow to Donald Trump, stupid woman? You don't have to bow to anybody. But look, my core point here is that the optics of this are terrible. You know, it looks silly, it's almost comedic, it's the sort of thing that a student radical comes up with, because that's what she is, basically. Just an upper middle class girl who's been indoctrinated by the university system. Now, these things are just so easy to pick apart now, we don't even really have to bother. I mean, their mission is to stop Trump, but Donald Trump doesn't know who they are, nor will he ever. Not to mention in their film as well, they had a girl holding a sign which says, you know, protect women and girls, which is something they're not very fond of doing when it turns out the perpetrators are from grooming gangs. The point is that the liberal left, it seems, are losing the argument. They're losing it morally, they're losing it politically, and they're losing it spiritually. Now, that doesn't mean that change is going to come on the back of that. You know, the political system is in the grip of the globalist liberal power structure, so it's going to hold on, and it's going to hold on with everything it's got, and as I say, it's going to go mask off. If it hasn't already, I do believe change is going to have to come from the grassroots rather than anywhere else, because the system's just so corrupt at this point. And I think the main reason why we're seeing the globalist liberal cause losing steam is because the counter argument is extremely powerful and taps into extraordinarily powerful energies. The aforementioned things such as nation, homeland, culture, a narrative throughout time, God, tradition, love, family, community. These things are what make human beings and human groups what they are. Now, for so long, for decades now, the liberal left has described anything of that nature as hate. And of course, you can always find the example, as I say, of some maniac foaming at the mouth, and they'll put him on the Guardian and the BBC and say, that's you if you're against the liberal system. But more and more people, day by day, are turning back and waking up and thinking, I'm not sure if that's true. I think it's perfectly normal to want to have your own homeland. I think it's perfectly normal not to want to be a minority in your own country. I think it's perfectly normal not to want to be gaslit by your own government and the state apparatus. And on top of that, as I say, this allows you to move into something greater. It's not a regression, as it's often seen by the liberal mainstream. It's actually an evolution. It's reawakening a lot of our older roots for a new era, which to me is quite a magical time. And what sort of a vision does the counter-side have for a future Britain? Well, it's more lectures from the Diane Abbott types about how you're evil and disgusting and racist, and she's the face of real Britain and true British values, don't you know? It's more endless awards and body sniffing from the liberal elite as they shower the adolescence writers and producers with awards for their, again, make-believe drama which bears no resemblance to reality about young white kids being the eternal problem. There is an increasingly small amount of people who can buy this sort of propaganda. Of course, the liberal elite, but outside of that, you've got to have a lot of money or be very deluded to buy into this now. We've got a cost of living crisis, the country's falling apart at the seams, mass migration is out of control, towns and cities have been swamped. You're called the evil if you speak out about it. Comedians are arrested at airports for jokes about trans people. It's hard to make the case that liberal Britain is some utopia. It's quite the opposite at this point. And I think this image summed up the situation we're facing in Britain very well. This is this fella, he's been made head of the Oxford Union, and apparently he got a pass to study PPE there, that's philosophy, politics and economics, with an ABB grade, and normally, you need straight A stars and more to study PPE because it's one of the best courses you can do in politics in the world. However, you can see he's now head of the Debating Society and he looks positively bored. He's also been laughing about Charlie Kirk and still, refused to stand down. And it's just another symbol of Britain being swallowed and taken over. This isn't positive. This isn't love. This isn't tolerance and kindness. It's a tragedy. Not to mention in the original picture anyway, there are no white English people anymore. And of course, they'd all think that's a good thing. There is something deeply unsettling about that image. I think for many of us who respect the traditions of Britain, and I'm a bit of a midwit myself, I don't think I could have made it to Oxford University if I tried my best. But if I could, what a magical experience to be part of this ancient institution. If we're honest, it's what inspired Hogwarts and J.K. Rowling. I don't know if she would admit it, but that's the magic really she's playing on. However, this guy, it's all boring to him, It doesn't mean anything. And of course, this is how so many of us feel that modern Britain is treated, and it's why there is this reawakening occurring. So as I often say, despite our times being chaotic and dark with much more darkness and propaganda and weirdness to come, we have to keep going back to our traditions, to solid ground. And again, real change in my view will come from the grassroots, because it has to be authentic. The system now is just too toxic, it's too fake, there's nothing real in there anymore. And that's why in the coming decades it will be rocky, but there will be a path through in my view. As always, do subscribe to this channel if you're new. Do check out the Substack and the sister channel if you're interested in spiritual and personal transformation. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your day.